That's the next story. Is Newcastle want Szoboszlai? Um,
Hmm.
okay, I mean, sure, 70 million euro release clause. That's an interesting one, Stefan. What do you think?
Yeah, so Sky Sports Germany kind of came out with this one, and um, it's kind of taken me by surprise, to be honest with you. I mean,
Mm,
Newcastle have been linked with a number of kind of Bundesliga players for much of the last kind of 12 or 18 months. I think Moussa Diaby at Leverkusen's perhaps the one who routinely gets linked almost on a daily basis, to be honest, here in the UK. And it's clear that they definitely need some sort of attacking midfielders or wingers next season. But Szoboszlai in particular is an odd one because, he's on a long-term contract. I think his deal's till 2026.
mm,
I wasn't aware of the release clause, but a 70 million euro release clause is actually a pretty hefty release clause, which, I think Newcastle would probably have to pay that if they were to sign him. But I do kind of feel like the circumstances at Leipzig right now probably dictate that they'd probably hold off from selling him if they could
yeah,
this summer because, we're obviously talking about the fact that Christopher Nkunku is supposed to be joining Chelsea. As you said
we
at the top
think.
of the show, yeah, as you said at the top of the show, nothing has been confirmed yet. Although maybe, as you said, maybe if we kind of link that in with the fact that Conrad Leimer hasn't been confirmed either, maybe this is just something that Leipzig have kind of stipulated or demanded from both clubs that, there's no song and parades about these players moving on until the end of the season. But if Nkunku does move on, as we expect him to move on, I'd be very, very surprised if Szoboszlai was allowed to move because he is, and he has developed into such an important player from the season. We talked a couple of
Mm,
weeks ago about the links with Danny Olmo moving on, and I kind of said, well, actually, I think Leipzig would be within their right to kind of cut the losses with Olmo just because, whether through injury or just through a lack of consistency, I don't really think he's lived up to his potential at Leipzig. And actually, to a large extent, Szoboszlai has actually kind of stepped in um, and kind of said and kind of decided to be that player for Leipzig. So if you kind of look at a kind of post Nkunku future for Leipzig, I think Szoboszlai is probably in line to be the next best player, if that makes sense. He's
mm.
hopefully going to fill in. He's going to be scoring the goals. He's going to be creating the assists. Um, and I think that's why I think Leipzig would be demanding and holding on to him. Whether, a release clause means that they don't have much say in the matter is another thing entirely. And I guess if Newcastle were to blow them at the water with that offer, then maybe there's not much that Leipzig could do about it. But if
Mm.
we're talking about Newcastle negotiating contracts and negotiating prices, which to be fair, they have done since the new owners have come in. They haven't splashed the cash quite like, Chelsea, for example. They've been quite considerate in their offers. They only pay what they think's a fair price. So I'd be surprised if Newcastle said, well, we're just going to go beyond you guys and just pay this release clause. I don't really expect that to happen. And I also don't expect Leipzig to be willing to sell him. So it's one to keep an eye on, but I'm not actually sure if there's much going on here.
Yeah, you also have to be careful with Leipzig and release clauses because my understanding is that they are soft release clauses. That they, and that was the thing with Nkunku. He didn't have a release clause. He had there is an understanding between the player and the club that at a certain price we are willing to
Mm,
talk. And I suspect that is the case here too, because Leipzig don't really do real release clauses, right? They set a price that they expect the other club to meet, and they let the player know in negotiations that if that price is met, they are willing to release that player. I think Guardiola is a really good example for this as well, right? Where they're like,
mm.
okay, if X club comes with X amount of money, yes, you have our understanding and blessing to move on, but there is no real release clause that you can just trigger. I think that is just something that Red Bull as an organization just doesn't want to have, which fair enough, as long as you find other ways to facilitate that, okay, makes sense.